Everybody, let's just take such a deep breath, okay? One more. Big breath in and let the exhale be longer than your inhale. Thank you, ladies, for being here, and your willingness and your bravery to do this is so appreciated. My new friend Jillian is gonna start, and she's just gonna dive in and tell us whatever she wants and how she was feeling, and that's gonna be the perfect thing for her to say. And we're gonna support and listen to everything that she feels and she has to say. And Jillian, I may or may not prompt you with questions. Let's just roll with it. As we know, this isn't this has not been rehearsed at all. So we're really kind of winging it here, and we're just going to see how this goes. So let us know a little bit about you.
All right. So I'm Jillian. I'm 28 years old. I've been estranged from my mom since I was about 15. It wasn't always like that. Like, we weren't always super distant. She was my best friend when I was little. We traveled the country together. We did everything together. She was my best friend. And when I was about 5 or 7, 5, whatever, she met a man that she just absolutely fell in love with, and that's when things began to change. She kind of sculpted her world around him. And he became incredibly abusive throughout my childhood. And I had this undying urge to protect my mom because she was sick. And I thought that, if I could take the brunt of this, if I could be strong for her, then, maybe he wouldn't hurt her. Maybe they would stop fighting so much. So the burden of kind of protection, I took that on because I didn't want to see her hurt. She was really, really fragile. We began to drift apart and fight a lot more. I mean, I suspect that happens a lot in everybody's teenage years with their mom. You kind of start to butt heads, and your mom's never right at that point. And then as things progressed, he became more and more physically and emotionally abusive until one night he made an attempt on my life. And my mom had throughout the time promised me that every single fight that she would leave him and things would go back to the way that they were. And I continued to believe that. But in my search for acceptance, I failed to see her search for acceptance. And she was just as scared as I was, looking for somebody to choose her, while I was also looking for somebody to choose me as well. Once he made the attempt on my life, my mom left, and everything seemed like it was going to be incredible, amazing. We were going to have such an amazing time together, and things were going to go back to how they used to be. Until one day she went back to talk to him, and I asked her, can I come home? Can we come get you? And she said that we needed to talk as a family. I was about 15 years old at this time. And that's when I realized, this is not a family that I want to be a part of. This is not a family that I can choose to be a part of if I'm going to survive into my adulthood. I was already at that point just contemplating how much longer I could continue living like this. So I decided to go home and face her. And I told her that if this is what her idea of a family was, that I didn't want to be a part of it. That I understand now why it angered my mom, but it angered her so much. And she said some really, really mean things in the hurt. One of the last things that my mom had said to me out of anger was that she wished she had aborted me. And that was kind of the final straw where I cut contact, and I couldn't continue to carry the burden of not only myself in my pubescent era and all these emotions I was already feeling, and also continue to carry her emotions. So I know that she tried to contact me for years and years. We've spent about 6 years estranged before she died, a week before my birthday. And I was so angry at her. It felt like her one last slight to me, because I was on vacation. I was going to be 21, And now you've missed this milestone too. And so like I let the anger and the hurt build because it felt so good to just remain angry and keep blaming her for everything, not see any of her side, just only see my side selfishly. And being able to justify why I was so angry all the time just really was amazing. And it felt right at the time. And it was so self-destructive. I fell into such self-destructive patterns of, I'll stick it to my mom. I'll show her like exactly why she shouldn't have been in my life. And, like exactly what kind of person she made me out to be, like consistently shifting the blame from understanding, or shifting my locus of entirety from accountability on any part to just on her part. And it wasn't until like I had spent so many years just being angry and turning into this person that I didn't want to be, until I realized that I was just repeating the same patterns in myself that I saw in my mom. And I was seeking acceptance in anybody and everybody, and I was doing things that I wasn't proud of, and I was putting myself and those that I cared about last in search of this acceptance. And it finally clicked for me one day that I had to accept an apology that I was never going to get. And I also had to give an apology that I was never going to be able to give. And every day I wake up wishing that I still had one more moment to just sit down and tell her, I understand now. I understand that she was searching for acceptance. I understand that she was searching for someone to care about her and love her the way that she never had. And that's when I really came to terms with the fact that like, it wasn't anger I was feeling, it was compassion for both of us. And it was that I didn't want to become this person that I saw my mom be, and then I became her. And it took that for me to fully understand, like, she was just as scared and alone as I was, and she didn't know how to express that, and she turned to the only safety that she knew, which was going back to the same thing, like the things we know comfort us. And she continued to go back to the things that she knew because change is scary. And I made the choice to change. And as I said, I would go back every day just to have one more opportunity to tell her that I loved her and that it wasn't her fault, and I understand. So it's taken me a while, but I've come to the point of letting go of that resentment and looking at it through the lens of compassion and understanding that this wasn't her fault. She was doing what she had to do, and I was doing what I had to do. And unfortunately, we never will be able to meet at that crossroads of understanding.
That's a lot for a little kid to go through. Yeah.
Yeah.
To feel that she chose somebody else. Now she was sick during this time, and is that why she chose this man? Maybe for financial reasons or security reasons? Do we know that?
I'm not sure about the financial reasons, but I definitely know it was for security reasons, because even before she met him, one of my like core memories was her like crying on the floor after a man broke up with her, and she didn't know I was behind her, but she kept repeating to herself, like, I don't want to die alone. And ultimately, like, she ended up dying alone with him at like the outside of her hospital room while I was like 2,000 miles away. And she got her worst fear came true. And it makes me so sad to know that.
What did she die of?
She had heart disease, or like she was born with a hole in the wall of her heart. So while they were replacing her pacemaker, she flatlined.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for letting me.
I have a lot of questions that we'll come back and let's dive into that a little more. I have a lot of questions. Cheryl?
I want to just say I'm so grateful to be here, to be able to have this multi-generational sharing. And Jillian, your story resonates with me, as I'm sure it does with so many other mothers and daughters. I was in a almost 17-year abusive alcoholic marriage. I have 2 daughters. And I knew I had to get out. It took me a very, very long time, to muster the strength, to get over all of my insecurity at how I'd be able to do it. I knew it wasn't a good environment for my daughters. He never turned the physical abuse on them, only me, but I know they felt it in so many other ways. And ironically enough, the turning point for me in getting out was my dad was somewhat abusive growing up, and he became very ill with pancreatic cancer. And my mom had 6 children with him, never even thought of leaving him. When he got sick, that was she said, "I'm not taking care of you." And it took all of us to convince her. And I kind of took over those duties. And I was so mad at her. And something hit me. And I said, I don't have it in me. I have too much compassion and empathy. I could never turn my back on someone who's dying. And I don't want to be married to someone and then, years later, not want to take care of this person or be with them. And I had counseling and just so much else. And I made the decision, even though he said he would kill me if I tried to leave him, which I guess he did try a few times. But so I got out, and it's almost like, and look, here I am, estranged. It just makes you wonder, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But fast forward many, many years later, my ex-husband was homeless and then became very sick. I ended up taking care of him so that my daughters wouldn't have to take the burden off. And then when I remarried to my current husband, I relinquished all of that, and the burden went to my daughters. But they loved their father. I'm in my second period of estrangement with my youngest daughter. The first one lasted about 2 years. Then we were back together with therapy, and we were back together when her father was dying, and I went and helped them. And then I actually planned his funeral, had it at my synagogue, even though he's not Jewish, but there was no place else. And I think the turning point for me, where I just wanted to give up, and was at the funeral when my estranged daughter stood up in front of a room full of, 50 people and said she was all alone in the world, that he was the only one that ever loved her. Myself, my other daughter were sitting there. It was as if we never existed. She just ripped out my heart. She just said she never felt loved at all from anyone except her father. So the turning point for me was I kind of had a little breakdown. She did estrange from me quite very shortly after that. I was taking pills for anxiety. I went in the bathroom. I just pictured myself taking the whole bottle and just wanting the pain to end. But, thank God I told people, and I was in therapy, and my husband, I was advised to have him take the bottle and just give me 1 or 2 as I needed them. So that's when I had to take control and really build myself back up. And I actually wrote so that, details of my estrangement journey that I wanted to read here today. Have you ever seen the movie Groundhog Day? It's about a man who wakes up every day and relives that same day over and over and over. At first, that's how it was for me. Living a day-to-day repetitive existence in which my youngest daughter went 100% no contact. I went to bed every night praying for contact to be reestablished, saying good night, I love you, as I was drifting off. Then I'd send an occasional text or email. Once I even tried to call. All went unanswered, as I made the brutal discovery that I was blocked. Each morning I'd wake up and open my eyes to the realization that she was not in my life. The beginning was the toughest. I think every single one of us going through this had the same questions, thoughts, and feelings playing over and over in a loop. What did I do? How did I fail them? I must be a terrible parent. Did I do horrible things? Maybe I just can't remember. I called each and every family member, I have 5 siblings, asking, was I a good parent? I know I made mistakes, as every parent inevitably does. I made the difficult decision to become a single mother when I left my abusive alcoholic husband, a story that's not dissimilar from countless others. I also called my close friends who had been in both of my daughters' lives as well, always asking the same question. Is there any validity to these outrageous stories of not feeding my children enough or providing adequate clothing? The answers from everyone were always full of shock, disbelief, and even anger directed at me for believing that it could be true. I felt hopeless and helpless, as well as a deep sense of humiliation. I experienced a lot of the same feelings that I had during my 17 years of physical and emotional abuse within my marriage. But somehow during that time, I found the strength, self-esteem, and glimmer of hope that I'd be able to change my life and show my 2 daughters that this behavior was unacceptable. I now understand there's no one-size-fits-all for estrangement. It occurs not only between adult children and parents, but also between other family members, dear friends, and loved ones. It feels like a disease that's incurable, even terminal at times. Some, like me, have been told again and again why they're a bad parent, the worst mom imaginable, and it would have been preferable to have ended up in foster care. Some might even consider me lucky that I have a long list of grievances from my daughter, stating why I was a bad mother from childhood and on. The list now recently includes unlocked and completely false memories of daily, behind closed door physical abuse by me. Others I've encountered have said their estrangement seemingly happened out of the blue, or maybe started with a small argument or misunderstanding, resulting in no contact, fully blocked. So I'm still undecided as whether 'tis nobler to know why, or to have no clue at all as to why it's happening. I've experienced firsthand the many stages of typical textbook grief associated with losing a loved one to death. Disbelief, shock, anger, denial, physical illness, sadness, longing, and depression. Due to the estrangement from my daughter, I've entered a newly discovered realm of ambiguous grief, grieving the living. This includes mistrust, self-doubt, self-blame, self-hatred, suicidal thoughts, physical pain, and the overall feeling that somehow I failed as a mother. Believe me, at this stage of my life, I've experienced the finality of death, the last breaths taken, the last struggle and gasps, the passing over, the whole heart-wrenching process with both of my beloved parents. And then 2 years ago, in a very different yet forgiving and compassionate way, with my ex-husband's death. The most recent, however, a year ago, was a tragic sudden death of one of my deepest longtime female friendships, a high school friend who went the wrong way on a one-way street in a blinding rainstorm. The grieving process for me in each case was a profound sense of loss that was felt as deeply as the love I had for that person. In other words, the deeper the love, the deeper the grief. Then in acceptance and finality, this person's never coming back. Compared with estrangement, this finality is never quite achieved, but the absence is felt daily. Whereas with death, we have no choice but to accept the finality part. They're not coming back. Yet we also miss these loved ones daily or intermittently. And we're reminded of them by photos, memories, signs in nature. Sometimes they even appear to us in dreams. It's amazing to me how I'm reminded of my estranged daughter by the very same exact details of ambiguous grief. So these feelings are similar to two other helpless and hopeless times in my life, my abusive marriage and my ongoing health issues. With abuse comes the shock and disbelief that it's actually happening, followed by shame, guilt, hurt, betrayal, and the practical piece of trying to hide the bruises. Always thinking we can fix the other person or hide the evidence. Kind of like the feeling you get when someone innocently asks how your adult child is doing. You're torn between telling them the often felt humiliating reality of being estranged or trying to cover up the awkwardness of not actually knowing how or what she's doing. I now know this is all completely and utterly out of my control. She will find her way back to me only if and when she's completed her own soul-searching, self-healing journey, her own path to forgiveness. In addition, most of us know about the mind and body connection. I've experienced similar feelings on my path to health as well. Disbelief, shock, grief over a constant feeling of sickness and physical pain, and feeling that I've manifested these issues or caused them to happen. I do believe there isn't a cure-all magic pill for any of our life experiences. You have to research, create a wellness plan, never give up hope, trust in yourself, if possible, also in a higher power. Then lovingly pass that on. Share your love, compassion, and forgiveness with others. My journey lately has evolved and taken me on a very different path. One of healing, positivity, and even seeking out the gratitude for my life experiences. Turning the powerless and hopeless situations into empowering realities, losing my victim persona, and trying to achieve the steps to finding my authentic self. I'm now able to feel the enjoyment of simple things and the beauty that surrounds me. It's been made possible by years of therapy regarding my history of abuse, individual therapy, counseling, support groups, Al-Anon, confiding in trusted and loving friends and family. But most recently, through a lot of research and effort, I located and joined various online groups for estranged parents of adult children. On one of these groups, I saw a post which was an invitation to an affirming and positive moving forward in your life Zoom discussion. In this group, I discovered the online course on finding your authentic self, layer by layer and step by step, led by Lisa Morris, who has since become a very dear and trusted friend. All of this has allowed me to move forward, and believe it or not, to feel grateful for all the difficult, painful, sometimes scary experiences in my life. And so, the underlying feeling that never, ever stops is how much I deeply love my daughter. With all my mother heart, deeply care about her, only wish her the very best, always and forever. I've uncovered a newfound belief deep in my soul that we will be authentically present in each other's lives only when she is ready and willing. Healing hugs and thoughts for all of us on this journey.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was perfect. That was beautiful. I think you really just encapsulated all of it. Thank you so much. Okay, Aaliyah, deep breath. It's getting harder, isn't it? More Kleenex, more deep breath.
Well, I'm Aaliyah. I'm 37 years old, and I was estranged from my mom in my 20s. So a little backstory is that I was adopted. And so growing up, it made me feel like I was never really accepted and part of the family. And I think that was the hardest part is like, we go to family gatherings and they're like, oh, those are your adopted kids. And my mom had other kids that were like loved and respected. And so it just felt like we were just kind of like pushed off and brushed off to the side. And then and growing up, we were just like, felt like she adopted us to be her ranch hands because she had a huge ranch and she like didn't really even have the time to work on it because she was working in like an hour away. So she had to do like 3 hours of commuting every day. So we didn't really even see her growing up. My sister, her daughter, is actually the one who took care of us and taught me how to read, taught me how to write, taught me how to like get my homework done and do all the chores. So it was just like, so having a relationship with my mom was really challenging because I never felt loved and accepted by her because it just like she just never felt like she was there. And so by the time I left the house and in my 20s and she would call, every time it felt like a negative conversation. And I just like, I didn't want to be around it. I didn't want to hear from her. I didn't want to have anything to do with her. So I just stopped talking to her. I just wanted to live my life for me. I didn't want to like hear from her anymore. I just didn't want to hear her voice. It just felt so annoying and obnoxious. And I just didn't like every time she called me, it was a guilt trip. It was like, oh, why don't I see you? Why don't you come around? And it's just the energy. I didn't want to be around it. And so I just stopped answering the phone one day. And I didn't make it like consciously. I didn't say, I'm not like talking to her ever again or whatever. I just knew at that moment in my life, I couldn't. I didn't want to. I couldn't. And I just wanted to live my life. I always knew like when I was ready, I would call her back someday. I didn't know. So it was about 2 years and I put myself through school. And so I paid for my own college and worked really hard to get my degree in human development. And luckily along that journey, it took a lot of soul searching and knowing that like either I had to cut my mom out of my life forever because she probably wasn't gonna change, or I had to accept her for who she was. And she's always been a single mother and she taught us a lot of good work ethics. So I had to start focusing on what the good was in her. I had to stop. Cheryl said it really well, being the victim, right? Because every time I would think about my mom, I would think about how I just was like, felt like I could have been treated better or I could have been loved more or something like that. And it's like, well, now I know she did the best she could do. She loved me with all of her heart, and maybe my version of love was different. And so I had to start realizing this was who she was and either accepting that, and if she changed, great, but I felt like I had to love her more than she could love me, I guess, or love her more than she even loved herself, and so I knew I had to be the first one to take that step and just love and accept her for her choices. And yeah, and then 2 years later I decided to just pick up the phone and give her a call, and now we're talking and I love her, but it's not easy. I feel like it's constant work and constant acceptance every single day, and not letting the little things creep under, not letting that like feeling of like annoyance really take control, but breathing through those moments and just knowing that they have a different perspective than you, and it's okay. and just like being okay with maybe having different memories than they do. So I'm super grateful for my mom, and I wouldn't be where I was today without her. And I think that's what's helped the most is the one story I wrote about being adopted. So she was literally, we went through so many homes, like 12, 15 homes in so short of time. And then they were pretty much like, if you don't get adopted, then that's that. And my mom was friends with the social worker. She wasn't even there to adopt a kid. And she heard about the story that me and my brother had gone through, and she immediately adopted us and took us home. And she's like, and she was 40 something. She was really older for parents back then. And so that's what I focus on now. That's what I was like, she was my saving grace. They said I was a failure to thrive. I didn't walk until I was 3 years old. They said that I think that baby's just going to lay there and die. And my mom did not let that happen. And so those are the moments I focus on now, not all of the victim stuff anymore. I am so grateful. And I think that's where we have to get to, is just that gratefulness and not all of the moments that we suffered through. So.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. Well, I only know you as a rock star. So thank you. And yeah, I attest to that work ethic, and she did a good job and you did a good job. And so did your mom, Jillian. I can just put myself so easily in every single one of your stories. You know, just from childhood, my generation, as we've discovered by having online Zoom calls over the course of a year, and just listening to everyone in my and Cheryl's generation share stories of our childhood, there was a common thread of one, if not both, parents being alcoholic. And, you know, as we know, you know, we are our parents until we do something different. Just by default, it's because we've had, you know, 20 years of programming. So growing up, it was a very volatile environment for me. I witnessed the abuse between my parents, mostly verbal. Occasionally when my dad would drink too much, then it got a little bit heavier. But I also know now, you know, to go back and look at my parents' situation, which was 1,000 times more horrendous than mine and what the situations in which they grew up. So when I look at the type of parents they were versus the parenting that they had, they actually did an amazing job. My dad was abandoned by both of his parents and raised by a grandmother who did not want him. My mom was, you know, nearly the youngest of 6 kids during the Great Depression. Just another mouth to feed, a total burden. So, but I was no different when I became a teenager. And I was my mom's therapist from the age of 7 years old. Tried to save her. She just confided in me everything that my dad was doing to her. You know, from a 7-year-old for many years. So, you know, very similar to you, Jillian. I just felt like it was my duty to support and save her until I started becoming of age. So probably around 17, 18, you know, as you mentioned, you know, just, they didn't like my music either. And I just wanted out of there. So when I went to college, just the distance was more, and not that it was really, you know, I drew a line in the sand, like you mentioned, you know, Aaliyah. It was more of just, we didn't have cell phones. So in college, if I wanted to call home, I had to find a payphone, and I never had a dime to make that phone call. So it just didn't happen. And now I'm in my own world. But so now I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm married, and now I'm having kids. And I started to see myself as my mom. And that was the last thing I wanted. She was just so negative. She couldn't talk without yelling. I come from a long line of angry German women, and it's just how we talk. There's often times now that my second husband will say to me, "You're talking really loud."
Mm-hmm.
And it was just the environment in which I grew up in. Everything was just always super loud, super volatile, or complete dead silence. There was just never an in between. So I had my first daughter, and my second daughter died. So I relate to what Cheryl is saying. The older we get, the more birthdays to have, just the more life experience we have, that we lived through, that we experience. And what catapulted my estrangement to my mom was when my second daughter died. She said to me, "If you were going to church, this wouldn't have happened." Well, a young 20-something really can't handle the shame of that, especially since I grew up in such a religious environment. And so I really had no choice but to just not have her in my life, because every time we would talk, it was always just this religious beating of I wasn't living my life right. So we became estranged for many years. But I want to share this really quickly before I get into my estrangement story, because my mom is now almost 80. And much like Aaliyah's mom, she's very negative, and a lot of times it's very difficult to talk to her. Love her now more than anything. We have a great relationship. She finally says, "I love you now." I mean, it's this estrangement has changed all my relationships in so many ways. So it's been interesting to watch the dynamic with my mom. And I recently asked her before this call, I said, "What were you doing during that time in my 20s when I didn't talk to you?" There was no internet, so she's not privy to this being, an epidemic or anything. And she just said to me, I don't even think I realized you were talking to me, because I was just trying to survive. She had finally left my dad after 20 years. And my little sister was still at home, who was, only in junior high. She was a lot younger than me. And my mom was working 3 jobs. And just like she said, she was trying to survive. She wasn't even aware that I was angry and not talking to her. And what really, now going through this, because everything, believe me, does come full circle. But what surprises me the most, or makes me the most sad, is that in my mid-20s, I became a multimillionaire. I could have helped her. And I just had no idea that was her life. She had no idea what was my life. So it's just parallel realities happening at the same time, that we just weren't even aware of what the other person was going through, because we were trying to survive. So now I have my 2 babies. I have 2 daughters. And now my marriage is somehow going down this path of becoming like my parents. And I'm caught in this marriage of like, how could this be? And now my husband becoming my dad, and just the control and the verbal abuse and the crazy things that were beginning to unfold in our marriage. And there was one key thing that I believe that I had that perhaps Cheryl didn't, or most mid-20-year-olds didn't have. I had money. Right? I had the ability to have an escape route. And I took that. So at the time of my divorce, my girls were only 2 and 5. So were they better off because of that? I don't know. Now we know there's so many psychological implications to just divorce in general, or somebody not growing up with 2 parents. So is it better to have 2 physical bodies there versus only just, we don't know. It's like Cheryl said, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. It doesn't matter. Estrangement doesn't care if you stayed with the same person, or if you had 5 marriages, or if you only had, it doesn't matter. But what I witnessed when I was going through the time of raising my daughters, one, I didn't have time to be on the phone and call friends, certainly not my mom. I was just so busy trying to figure my life out. And on occasion, if I would date people, I really noticed a change with my daughters. They're like, who is this? What's going on? So for nearly 2 decades, until my oldest went to college, they really didn't even know I dated. It happened every other weekend when they were with their dad, because I recognized how challenging it was for them to witness me in that relationship. And besides, their dad was also, and I don't want to bash him, because he was such he was such an important person in their life as well, like two parents are. But he had married and divorced 5 times during that period. So they had this constant influx of change in other partners. And of course, again, the irony through the parental alienation that's happened, I'm the one who became estranged, and he's gotten closer to them. But something recently happened that shifted, but I'm not going to share. But so I raised my daughters alone, and thought I was doing a good job. I was very hands-on. I had a very flexible career. I could be there for them when they needed me. And that's what I thought I did. But I fully recognized that I was raising 2 very different human beings. My first daughter was this just red hair, blue eyes, go-getter, type A, wouldn't stop, wouldn't slow down, never took a nap, couldn't have enough activities going on to keep this kid busy. And my second daughter came along, and she was just this sweet, gentle little soul who just wanted to be at home and was ready. She would put herself in bed when she needed a nap. And they were raised very differently. And my first daughter, I let experience more in the world because it was her personality and it was who she was. But my second daughter, I didn't want my little sweet little baby to have to deal with the rough world that was out there. So did I protect her a little bit more? I did. But I was also harder on her, because my first daughter, I constantly was saying, slow down, relax, just go watch TV, take it easy. And my second, I was constantly saying, come on now, we got to get our homework done. We got to do this. It's time to engage. So they were raised very, very differently. And this is important for me to share this, because they believe that I favored my oldest daughter. And that's part of this big estrangement, because I talk to my older daughter now, not initially. So they grew up with this belief system that I favored her because I was harder on my younger daughter, because she just wasn't built for the crazy, mean world that she was going to become a part of. And I was the one who was tough on her. So, but we were close. The 3 of us were very close. And my estrangement came out of the blue, I thought, because we went from talking on the phone every week for an hour or 2, mostly laughing. We would always crack each other up. And she was going through college and then getting ready to start law school, and things I thought were really good. And then one day a really weird thing happened, which, Jillian and I are going to come back to in a minute, because we both had this same experience. But all of a sudden, things just went really south really quickly. And to try to make sense of this argument we had, I was yelling and screaming and triggering her, apparently, with my yelling and screaming, like what she claimed I always did. And so then there was she decided, I don't know how long, I can't talk to you, but I can't talk to you. So we actually did have a very verbal falling out, and I tried to reach out and I tried to apologize and tried to ask what just happened, because I was just stunned. And then, but she at that point, she wouldn't engage with me. So now my older daughter comes in, and she also says, she starts kind of delivering through what her sister was feeling. Okay. And this kid doesn't hold anything back. She's just a powerhouse. When she was 5 years old, she would look up at me with her two big red ponytails, and she would just say, "Why do you get to make all the decisions?" So that's who she is. And she's the one that delivered the blow, and told me everything that I had done wrong since the beginning of time. And after about the 7th or 8th item on that list, probably after the 3rd or 4th item on that list, I just checked out. I just didn't even know what I was hearing anymore. And now, not only did I lose my first daughter, but now I lost my second. Well, they were my world. I didn't have relationships. I put everything into them, making sure they had everything I didn't have. They played musical instruments. They were so talented. They went to a private school, had the best education. They learned how to play chess, to be strategic thinkers. They went to spiritual schools, a Montessori school at first, and then a Catholic high school. Not that we're Catholic, but just that I believe God belongs in school. And I raised them on a very spiritual path. So much so that I was always in their schools teaching spirituality. It was just part of my life with them. And I was a photographer for many years. And from the time they were like 5 years old, I would go in and teach after school enrichment programs on the spirituality of photography and the importance of staying focused and opening your light with that aperture. And just the camera was used as a metaphor for a spiritual teaching. And then in junior high, I went and spoke to 200 junior high kids, about, in this very affluent private school, about how money is not going to make you happy. Of course, my youngest daughter was just horrified that her mom had the microphone in front of 200 of her peers. But this was their life. I raised them in a very spiritual environment, meditation, take breaks, no electronics, time out. That's how they were raised. And it was all wrong, apparently. So when my second daughter delivered the list and how she justified her sister's estrangement, I didn't see a reason to live anymore. And I wasn't going to tell anybody because I didn't want it to be stopped. If somebody tells you that they're thinking those things, they want help and they want you to stop. If they don't, it's often too late. So I'm with my second husband, which I was aware, even though my kids were much older and gone, I still felt that they felt like I was choosing him over them. I always felt that. I could feel it from them because we were so close. And I didn't know how to bridge it, to be honest. I mean, he had his kids, I had my kids, and I knew I didn't do a good job. And I don't even know if there's a way to bridge your second marriage. I don't know. But I have my second husband, and at the time we had a cabin cruiser on Lake Pend Oreille, which is this huge, huge lake in North Idaho. And it's very cold. And I always told him that, if I was ever dying of a terminal disease, that in the middle of January, I would just want him to bring me out to the lake and just dump my body in Lake Pend Oreille, because I wanted to freeze to death, because freezing is the most peaceful way to die. And so I'd been contemplating this. And one morning we would go out early in the morning. Sometimes we would sleep at the boat in the dock, and then we would go out before the sunrise, and there was just no other boats out there, maybe an occasional fisherman, but you never saw anything out on that lake. And so I got in the water, which I do, because it's, great cryotherapy, and I'm a swimmer. I love swimming every day. And so this one day I decided to get in the water, and I'm moving farther and farther and farther away from the boat. And he even yells out at me, you're getting too far away, and I can't come get you. And I just kept going farther and farther and farther out, and the water was freezing, and my arms and legs were getting numb. And so I just floated back on my back, and I was just going to check out. And then something amazing happened. The sun came up, and it was so warm on my face. And I looked up, and I could see the sun at the horizon, and there were those light beams coming across the water. And it just became a lifeline at that minute. And then there was that voice that said, not today, not today. Get your ass back to that boat. Not today. So I flailed myself back to the boat with very numb arms and legs. I didn't really know what it meant. I didn't know why I was even going back to the boat. Sat there just shivering, trying to thaw out. My husband even said to me, it'd be very selfish of you to do something stupid. But I didn't know what that next thing was. But I just took a step. I just took a big leap of faith. And that week I started the Zoom call for parents with no agenda. And that's where I met so many wonderful people who were listening, and Cheryl and Dr. Ruth. And for a year we just shared. And then at a year I reached out to my daughter, and because she said I need time, so I reached out to her at a year and said, when is this going to end? Of course, I said it very gently, and she said, I don't see it changing in the foreseeable future. So I said, all right, it's time to do the work. It's time to do my work. I've done this work so many times. I have been through so many hardships, like all of you. I have engaged my spiritual practice so many times. And this one was like, wow, really, God? Really? This is the lesson? And I just did it. I just said, okay. And I started going through a process which was similar to my process that I'd done in the past, but in a very different way, because there's nothing like the pain of estrangement. It's a broken heart, but this broken heart is nothing like a romantic broken heart. So I'm familiar with the whole gamut of all of these things. And so I just went through this process, and I created a course as I was going through it. Some of you have gone through it. And now it's the 4 levels of relationships. The only relationship that ever matters with any of us is the relationship we have with ourselves. And we know this. We know it's always ourselves that we have to reconcile with. Jillian had to reconcile with herself, not her mom. Aaliyah came to terms with herself, not her mom. Same with Cheryl. First level is when we're the victims that we've all experienced and that we talked about. And we experience those emotions of the lowest level of consciousness being shame, which is accompanied by suicide. And if we can't stay there, what we do is we blame. If we are in such the deepest depths of shame, the only way out of that is to blame someone else. So if my daughters are experiencing any level of shame whatsoever, and they need to blame me, they can blame me. I don't know how long it's going to take. And level 1 is also that guilt and the regret and the overwhelm and the fear. The fear is the ceiling that holds us captive in that miserable, miserable place. But to get out of that sadness and the sorrow and the crying and the missing them, we move into level 2, which is anger. And we stay there, and we become justified in that anger and that bitterness, and we get pissed off, and it's justifiable. And if we want to keep moving, level 3 is forgiveness. Level 4 is love. Cheryl and I just completed level 4. A few others on the call have just completed level 4. And it's just learning to see this whole thing so differently. and healing our wounds, because they've existed for all of us. We all have this. And it's our work and our journey. And here's where we are. And then meeting Aaliyah and making this a whole other something, and her introducing us to Jillian. And, you know, here we are. We don't know where this is going. We just said yes to something. We just said, yeah, I'm willing to show up. I'm willing to accept whatever it is that I can do, that we can do to help others on this journey with us. Well, thank you all for sharing. Let's take a 2-minute break,